Caleb came up from the basement slower than he went down. He didn't say a word, just crossed the kitchen like he was walking through water, and sat down across from me. His face was pale, his jaw tight, and when I reached for his hand, it trembled. "Grandma?" he said, not looking at me. "We have to go. Pack a bag." I blinked at him. "What, Caleb? What are you talking about?" "We're leaving. Now. No calls, no messages. Just your essentials. Go get them." I half laughed, trying to cut the tension. "Did a squirrel scare you down there?" He didn't smile. Instead, he turned his phone toward me and tapped the screen. "Look." I leaned closer. The photo wasn't clear at first. Wires pipes a small box until I saw what they were connected to. The junction where my furnace met the old air vents. Except there were no vents anymore. Victor had sealed them up a few months ago to help me save on heating. "What is that?" I asked. "A timer. A release valve. Someone hooked it into the ductwork." I stared at the image. "Who would even—" His lips tightened. "Do you need help packing?" I sat back dizzy. "Caleb." "Who put that in there?" He didn't answer. The silence between us stretched thick and heavy. Then the phone rang. He glanced at the screen and flipped it face down. "Who is it, Victor?" I didn't speak. I just looked at the phone, then at Caleb. My son's name glowed faintly before the screen dimmed. "I need you to trust me," Caleb said. "Right now." He stood up and walked to the front door. His keys jingled like they were too loud in the stillness. I rose slowly, feeling the floor shift beneath me. My slippers dragged across the tile as I stepped toward the stairs. Upstairs, I packed, without thinking. Meds, toiletries, warm clothes, the old photo of Walter I kept by my bed. Everything else I left behind. When I came down, Caleb was already pulling his truck into the driveway. I hadn't zipped a suitcase in years. I fumbled with the teeth of the old duffel bag fingers, stiff from the cold and age. I packed by memory, not logic socks. Pills. Walter's watch, the navy flannel I wore every winter since he died. I glanced around my bedroom, searching for anything else that felt like mine. But everything did. The chair by the window, the photo albums in the closet, the curtains Walter had hung crooked, then left because I said it gave the room charm. Every corner of this house held his hands. The built-in shelves in the living room, the beadboard wainscoting in the hallway, the thick oak kitchen counters he'd sanded until smooth. Victor once called the place outdated. He'd offered to renovate, said the old vents wasted energy, said he'd take care of the wiring. I thought he was being generous. I thought maybe we were healing. I didn't speak much as I came down the stairs with my bag. Caleb took it from me without a word and helped me into the truck. He drove faster than usual, jaw-locked eyes straight ahead. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I didn't ask where we were going. I just stared out the window at the houses we passed. Neighbors I knew, porches. I'd sat on gardens I'd admired in spring. We turned off my street and onto the highway. I didn't look back. Caleb pulled into a gas station 10 minutes later and stepped out to pump. I watched him check his phone, his thumb frozen on the screen. When he got back in, he showed it to me. 14 missed calls from Victor. 6 from Naomi. "Don't answer?" he said quietly. "Not yet." I nodded and turned away. My reflection in the window stared back at me. I looked tired, small, not scared, just thinner than I remembered. Back on the road, Caleb adjusted the rearview mirror. I could tell he was trying to think ahead, solve this like a job site. But this wasn't drywall or plumbing, and neither of us knew how deep it went yet. The hum of the highway filled the silence between us. I watched the fields roll past brittle and pale under the winter sun, and my mind went back to the small things I'd brushed aside. The faint, metallic smell near the furnace. The dull headaches that came and went. The doctor's gentle voice saying my body was just slowing down. I'd believed him. I'd believed all of them. Victor had stopped by one weekend in September, toolbox in hand, saying he was updating my heating lines for efficiency. He always used that word as if it made every intrusion sound noble. He stayed in the basement for hours, came up covered in dust, kissed my cheek, and said, "You'll notice lower bills by winter." I remember thanking him. I even made him a sandwich. After that, the air in the house felt different, heavy, stale. Some mornings, I'd wake with a pounding in my temples, my stomach twisting. I blamed my age, the weather, maybe grief. When the detector beeped, Victor checked it himself. He said it was just sensitive, that the new wiring interfered with the signal. I nodded, embarrassed for worrying. Now, sitting in Caleb's truck, I reached for my purse and pulled out that same detector. I'd taken it from the wall when we left without really knowing why. Caleb took it from me, flipped it over, and pulled the back panel off with his pocket knife. "See this?" He pointed to the battery. It was welded in place with a thin silver seam. "It's dead, Grandma. It can't even power on." He made it look like it was working. I stared at the plastic shell in his hands. My headaches, my dizziness, my weakness, it all rushed back like a single breath I'd been holding for months. It wasn't age. It wasn't grief. It was poison. Caleb snapped the detector shut and tossed it on the dashboard. His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white around the wheel. "We need to talk," he said. "There's more I found down there." He turned off the highway and pulled into a diner parking lot. The diner was nearly empty, its lights too bright after the dim hum of the road. Caleb chose a booth in the corner, one hand still around his phone. The waitress brought us coffee without asking. I wrapped my fingers around the cup, though the heat did nothing to steady me. He laid the phone on the table and swiped through the photos one by one. Metal fittings, copper tubing, sealed vents painted over to look old. In one, a small digital timer blinked in the corner of the frame. "This is what's under the floor," he said quietly. A slow-release valve connected to the furnace. It runs on a timer, releases just enough gas when the heat kicks in at night. My throat felt dry, enough to, not right away, slowly, over time. You'd just get sicker until... He stopped. I looked at the photo again. The precision was unmistakable, clean joins, deliberate placement. Not the work of someone careless. Someone had planned this like a project. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't want to believe it, Grandma. But this is engineered. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing." I didn't need to ask who. Victor had always been good with systems airflow mechanics, anything that could be measured. He'd worked 20 years at a defense contractor building things he could never talk about. 6 months ago, he stopped talking altogether. Said work was complicated. Said I shouldn't worry. Emily's voice echoed in my head, her constant chatter about real estate markets, interest rates, refinancing. She always sounded desperate to keep up with people richer than they were. And Naomi, my steady one, had been distant too, her husband's illness draining them. She'd mentioned medical bills that made her want to scream. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Grandma, this wasn't random. The system was designed to look like maintenance work. It would have looked natural on the report if anything happened." I felt a cold ache move through me, through all the lines connected to Victor, to the house, to me. Caleb scrolled to the last photo, the timer frozen mid-countdown. He looked at me. This wasn't just him. I didn't tell Caleb everything right away. Some truths sit heavy until they're ready to be spoken. While he scrolled through the photos again, my mind went back to a day in early autumn when Victor stopped by unannounced. He'd brought coffee and that easy charm he wore like a uniform. Said he was worried about me managing the bills alone. "Let me streamline things for you," he'd said, smiling like it was a favor. "I can handle the utilities, the mortgage, the insurance, make it all automatic, so you don't have to think about it." I remembered laughing, telling him the house had been paid off for years. But he pressed. "It's about efficiency, Mom." If something happens to you, we don't want the paperwork to be a mess." Something in the way he said it made me uneasy. Not the words, the tone beneath them, smooth and rehearsed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to the cabinet where I kept my records and began moving things. The deed, my will, my insurance policy, all of it went into a locked box in my closet. The next day, I called my lawyer and asked him to send duplicates to his office for safekeeping. I didn't tell anyone, not even Naomi. After that, Victor stopped dropping by as often. His calls got shorter, his voice cooler. Sometimes weeks passed without hearing from him. When he did visit, he seemed distracted, always checking his phone, glancing around like the walls were closing in. At Christmas, he'd brought me a gift, an expensive set of kitchen knives, though he knew I barely cooked anymore. I thanked him and tried not to notice how he avoided meeting my eyes. Now, sitting across from Caleb, I understood what those visits had really been. Tests, probes. He'd been gauging what I knew, what I'd signed, what he could access. Caleb reached across the table and touched my hand. "You did the right thing," he said. I nodded slowly. For the first time, I realized those small acts of suspicion might have kept me alive. Caleb checked his watch. "We need to move again before they find us." The motel smelled like bleach and old carpet, but it was quiet, and that was all I needed. Caleb checked us in under his name, paid in cash, and parked the truck where it couldn't be seen from the main road. Inside the room, he pulled out his phone and began uploading everything, every photo, every recording, every diagram. He created backups on 2 separate drives and sent copies to his old project manager, a man he trusted from his contracting days. I sat on the edge of the bed, too tired to undress, too alert to sleep. My bag rested beside me, zipped tight. Caleb stood by the window for a long time before turning to me. "I need to go back," he said quietly. "Your notebook, the one with your symptoms. You said it was by the bed." "It's not safe," I said. He nodded. "I won't go inside unless I know they're gone. 5 minutes, Grandma. That notebook proves this wasn't an accident." I didn't argue again. He was already lacing his boots. After he left, I sat in the quiet and listened to the creaks of the building. I counted each passing car. I pressed my hand against the motel door more than once to check the lock. He returned nearly an hour later, his face pale, breathing, uneven. The notebook was clutched in his hand, but that wasn't what made my stomach drop. "They were there," he said, shutting the door behind him. "Dad and Naomi." I stayed by the garage behind the fence. I didn't speak. They were in the kitchen. The window was open, just a crack. I heard everything. He dropped the notebook on the bed and ran a hand through his hair. Dad said, "If the police find that basement, we're done." My pulse thudded in my ears. Naomi answered. She wasn't supposed to live this long. He looked at me, eyes dark and steady. They weren't panicked. They were planning what to do next. I reached for the notebook with shaking hands as the motel phone started to ring. The motel phone rang 4 times before it stopped. Caleb didn't answer. He'd already turned off my cell, left his own recording device running, and packed our things. We were halfway to the back door when we heard tires crunching outside. Caleb peeked through the curtain and swore under his breath. "It's them." We moved fast. The rear hallway was dim and empty, lit by a buzzing exit sign. We slipped through the emergency door and out into the alley. But we weren't alone. Victor stood at one end near the dumpster, arms raised like he came in peace. Emily leaned against the hood of a dark sedan, arms crossed. Naomi was closest, standing by the side entrance, one hand tucked in her coat pocket. Mom Victor said, his voice low and coaxing, "We just want to talk." Caleb stepped in front of me. "You need to leave. We're not here to hurt anyone," Emily added. "She's confused. She doesn't understand what's happening." "I understand more than you think," I said. Naomi stepped forward slowly. Her hand came out of her pocket. She held a small syringe, its contents clear and still. It's just to help you calm down, she said softly. You're not well, Iris. You need rest. Caleb moved, shielding me completely. Stay back. Victor took a single step closer. You're overreacting. This whole thing, it's gotten out of hand. We can fix it. Let's just get back in the car. Emily's voice cut through sharper now. She's already lived her life. We're just trying to survive. It hit me, then they weren't sorry. They weren't even desperate. They were resolute. Caleb reached for his phone. Line's been open since the first ring. Sirens wailed in the distance. Naomi's eyes widened. Emily turned. 2 squad cars skidded into the alley, lights flashing. Officers jumped out with guns raised. Drop it, someone shouted. Naomi dropped the syringe. Victor raised his hands. Emily froze. I stood behind Caleb, breath shallow, as officers surrounded them one by one. An officer approached me, calm but firm. Ma'am, are you safe? I looked past her to where my children were being cuffed. I think I am now, I said. The next morning, Detective Alvarez called. She asked if I could come down to the station and give a formal statement. Caleb drove. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the roads. I thought I knew streets that used to lead to safety, to home. At the station, they led us into a small interview room. Caleb handed over the photos, the detector, my symptom notebook. I gave my account slowly, carefully. The headaches, the smell the day Victor sealed the vents without asking. Every detail that had once felt like coincidence now revealed itself as intent. By noon, the forensic team had entered my house. Alvarez returned later that evening, a folder thick with printed photos in her hand. They found everything she said, laying them on the table. One photo showed the vent behind my bedroom wall, sealed with drywall, just like Caleb said. Another showed the gas line under the floor, the small timer device tucked inside the ductwork. She flipped to an image of the carbon monoxide detector. The battery was clearly soldered into place. Tampered intentionally, she said. Designed to appear functional, but couldn't detect anything. Victor's desktop computer held more. Hidden in a folder labeled Home Projects, they found diagrams and calculations under the file name Gradual Exposure Plan. Notes about airflow, blood saturation, rates how long it would take for symptoms to mimic cognitive decline. Emily's phone contained a series of texts between her and Naomi. One stood out. It's been long enough. We need to get it over with. Another followed. Once the paperwork clears, we move fast. Don't let her change anything. Naomi's work laptop had been used to research death certification procedures for seniors, notes on how to avoid triggering autopsies, keywords flagged by insurance, phrases that wouldn't raise suspicion. Detective Alvarez looked me in the eye. They planned this for months, every part of it. Together, I stared down at their handwriting, their words, their blueprints for my death. Caleb reached across the table and held my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat with the weight of it all, what they built and what they destroyed. 2 weeks after the arrests, Detective Alvarez called again. She said Victor wanted to see me. I almost said no. Then I thought of Walter, the man who believed forgiveness was a form of courage, and I agreed. The county jail was gray and echoing a place that seemed to absorb sound. They led me through a hallway to a small room divided by glass. Victor was already there. His hair had grown out, his eyes hollowed. When he saw me, his mouth twitched like he meant to smile but couldn't remember how. He picked up the phone first. Mom. I lifted mine slowly. Why? He looked down, then away. It wasn't supposed to go that far. I lost everything. My job, my house. Emily was drowning in debt. Naomi couldn't help. I thought that you'd kill me. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what it's like. You spend your whole life working, doing everything right, and one layoff erases it all. I panicked. I wasn't thinking straight. I studied him the same way I used to when he came home late from high school and thought I couldn't smell the cigarette smoke on his jacket. You were thinking clearly enough to design a system, to build it, to test it. He didn't deny it. I just wanted control again. I leaned closer. You had control, Victor. You had a family, a mother who would have helped if you'd just asked. He pressed his hand to the glass. I'm sorry. I shook my head. No, you're not. You're sorry you failed. For a long moment we just stared at each other, the boy I raised and the man who nearly ended me. There was no bridge left between us, just the silence of what used to be love. When I left the jail, the air outside felt too wide, too cold. Back home, I closed every joint account, filed new documents, and revoked every authorization tied to my name. I slept with the lights on that first week, afraid of both silence and memory. By the second week, I could finally sit in quiet without fear. Caleb came by that Sunday with boxes. 6 months later, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick building across town. No garden, no porch swing, no view of the old maple tree, but it was quiet, clean, and no one else had a key. Caleb brought the cabinets over in the back of his truck. Walter's cabinets, the ones he'd built himself when we first moved into the house. They'd come down carefully, each hinge removed without a scratch, each panel wrapped in a moving blanket like something sacred. The landlord had agreed to the installation, no questions asked. Caleb spent 2 days fitting them into the new space. The measurements didn't line up perfectly, but he made them fit, adjusted the frame, refinished the edges, rehung each door until they closed without a sound. I sat at the kitchen table while he worked, listening to the hum of his tools. He didn't speak much, but he didn't need to. I watched his hands, steady, patient, thoughtful. Walter's hands. When he was done, I stood up and ran my fingers along the oak grain, the smooth corners, the joints that held without nails. They're stronger than the walls, he said. Half smiling. They always were, I answered. On Thursdays, he still comes by. He brings groceries, makes dinner, tells me about the houses he's working on. The older ones he loves best. He says they tell the truth if you know how to listen. I've started sleeping through the night again. Not because I think the world is safe. It's not. But because I know someone still remembers how to build something that lasts. Not with shortcuts or silent poison. Not with plans and lies. But with work. With care. With the belief that some things, some people are still worth protecting. The cabinets hang quiet in the morning light. I keep the coffee mugs in the left, one tea, and sugar in the right. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for something and pausing, my hand resting on the wood. Not in fear, just in gratitude. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough.